Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. There's the button. I knew there was one there somewhere. April 3rd, Monday, April 3rd, 2023. Nothing happened as far as I know while we were away. Not a big deal. Yes, we had to take Friday off. So, hey, good morning. How you doing, everybody? Time for another show. Time to figure out what's been going on in the last couple of days. I don't know. We had college tours scheduled. I didn't know Donald Trump was going to be indicted that day. But, we've been spending 2 weeks walking around saying Donald Trump's probably going to be indicted. But it actually never occurred to me that it would just drop on the day that we were off. Not that I could have or would have changed anything anyway. And Friday was probably, had we done a live show, it probably would have been full of complaints about how the very savvy punditry was producing article after article about how, indicting a former president set such a dangerous precedent for the country or endangered our democracy, and empowering the Republican narrative of the day, of the hour anyway, at that time, which was, if you are going to set this precedent, then fine, we're going to just start indicting every former Democratic president, just to show you what a giant mistake it was to indict former presidents. We'll make more of those mistakes. 2, 3, 5, 7 wrongs will eventually make a right. And somehow this is not noticed and called out for what it is by the press corps. And instead, not only do they allow that to happen, or in some cases print it themselves, they write it themselves, but I guess the capper of the weekend, as it turns out, although I didn't realize that it was going on until it was too late, not that I could have stopped it or anything like that, but that murdery Trader Green, I guess, gets a forum on 60 Minutes to do her shtick, and Leslie Stahl, I guess, in thinking, I'll be exposing her and her craziness to the whole world. And from what I understand, kind of more or less uncritically, given what was being said, relatively uncritically, just let her go for however long they allotted to her. I did see one transcript of an exchange in which I'm sure Leslie Stahl thinks I'm confronting her, because in Leslie Stahl's world, everybody who hears that murdery Trader Green has said that Democrats are the party of pedophiles understands how crazy that is, how crazy you have to be to say something like that, and what it means for the future of the Republican Party or whatever. And, by the transcript, which sometimes doesn't reveal all of the subtleties, but perhaps someone who has seen this thing has different feelings about it. But by the transcript, basically, she reads her that quote and says, "You say that the Democratic Party is the party of pedophiles." And murdery Trader Green just stands there basically and says, at bottom, yes, they are. They're the party of pedophiles. And there's silence. And then Leslie Stahl says, "Wow, okay." And then moves on. But the wow, okay in print is 1,000 times worse. I don't care if there was any eye rolling or gasping or whatever was going on. It just it's not confronted. It's not the role of, if it's not the role, maybe it is the role, but if it's not the role of 60 Minutes interviewers to then say, wow, you might be mentally ill and you should consider having, your family and friends should be considering intervening on your behalf, perhaps institutionalizing you. But one place I know you don't belong is the Congress of the United States. You should think about seeking counseling immediately. If that's not in the repertoire, then it's just platforming. Then there's really just nothing you're going to be able to do to respond to that thing naturally and helpfully. Anywho, so I thought that was an interesting capper to the weekend. The indictment, it happened. The arraignment will be, I believe, Tuesday. They seem to like doing things on Tuesdays around here. I'm not really sure what it is. Greg Dworkin is with us. The basketball's almost over. We're not quite there yet. I don't know if you got one eye on that. How are you, Greg?
I'm fine.
What do you make of all this?
Why don't we start with that? Because
What?
It's going to be a really eventful week. And one of the events happens to be the men's final tonight.
Yes, right. That thing.
And then tomorrow is a big day because you get to celebrate the men's final.
Yes.
Whoever wins. Oh, by the way, there's also an indictment.
Yes. Oh, and
there's also a election for Supreme Court in Wisconsin tomorrow.
Yes.
There's also a mayoral election in Chicago tomorrow.
All right.
So all of that will take
big
place
elections
after your show.
Right.
But we'll have a lot to say about it on Wednesday.
That's good. The timing is good for you. Good for Wednesday. By the way, an almost interesting entry in the basketball books. So Division I men's final is tonight. Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out that over in little old Division III, they almost pulled a UConn over there, and it was tiny little Virginian Christopher Newport University.
Oh, yeah?
Congratulations to the men's national champion Christopher Newport University captains who won the Division III championship over the weekend. And the Christopher Newport women, somewhat less fortunate, but had an excellent, and I believe up until the end, undefeated season. But in the finals, lost their first game of the year. CNU in the finals in both games didn't quite match the UConn feat of winning both. But I don't know how many teams have ever made it to the finals of both in the same year. But a remarkable accomplishment for everybody.
That's fantastic.
So congrats, kids. Yeah.
So
pretty cool.
Do you know who John Cena is?
He's no. Yes, it's so familiar. And I was a basketball dude.
He's a professional wrestler.
All right, that guy. All right. I don't know. Yeah, you know what? You mentioned him the other day. That's why.
Wrestling memes and how they fit in politics.
Okay. Yes, I remember that report, and that's where the name came up, except I didn't file the name correctly. Greg said this. Was it basketball or was it wrestling? What else are we even talking about?
Well, I didn't mention it during that report.
You didn't?
But it turns out he's a very well-known and famous wrestler, current. And, he has this little habit that he picked up. I got a nice video about it. He picked it up from his brother.
Okay.
Of when he's winning.
Yes.
He puts his hand in front of his face and says, "You can't see me."
Okay.
I am so far away from you. I'm so far above you. You can't see me.
Okay.
And he taunts his opponents with it. He's famous for
that. Oh, well, yeah, to some people. Oh,
well,
okay.
Wins,
so I know this, Brad. Yeah, okay, absolutely. He's a movie actor now.
He came up in the women's final in the NCAA tournament.
Did he? Okay.
Because Caitlin Clark from Iowa, the incandescent star who's just had an incredible run before losing in the final to LSU, does it all the time to her opponents. All the time. She's a trash talker. She not only plays like Larry Bird, she trash talks like Larry Bird.
Wow, that is something.
It's great. It's perfect. It's what sports is.
I did not see that. I saw the Virginia Tech women in the semifinals. I saw that game, but that's really something. And now I've looked up. Now I've seen John Cena, and I do know that guy. I don't know why I didn't recognize the name, but I've seen him. He's all over the place now.
Right. So it came up in the LSU final because LSU's Angel Reese trash talked Caitlin Clark because LSU won.
Well, then you're allowed, I guess.
Exactly right. Then you're allowed. And so when you can back it up with your play, you get to do it.
Okay.
The thing is that Reese is black and Clark is white. So oddly enough, and surprisingly enough, nobody could see this coming. Caitlin Clark's just a wonderful sportsman. It's just so wonderful. Oh, Angel Reese, how rude. How dare she do, Get it?
Yeah.
It's actually all John Cena. So, stand down.
Okay.
Right?
He's
it's
white.
Just part of the deal.
I can see him.
And Angel Reese is great. And LSU was fantastic. And they played wonderfully.
Yeah.
And I hate their coach, but it doesn't matter.
Well,
Coach is a homophone, but it doesn't matter.
I didn't realize
basketball. It was the kids, and they played wonderfully.
I don't know anything about them. Okay.
And
well, that is good.
I'm telling you that it came up in a discussion, and you could see it in all sorts of different fora.
No,
but
you're
it's
right.
all about wrestling. I'm just telling you, it's all about wrestling because you probably didn't know.
I didn't, and now that I've seen the picture, John Cena is pretty famous. I had forgotten that I A, knew who he was, and B, that he was originally a wrestler. He's, he's moved into the other field, the other side of acting now.
Yeah, acting.
The one with we were sometimes put shirts on and walk around.
Yeah, and people film you.
Mm-hmm.
But he's an actor and a wrestler.
Yeah.
And he wrestles when he acts, and he acts when he wrestles.
Okay.
Certainly acts when he wrestles.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I just want people to have the background on that. So
don't
get too carried away about the whole controversy. It's not really a controversy. What happened is it was a wonderful game. Everybody played great. Caitlin Clark is a star. Yes, she trash talks. Yes, it's / good, bad, depending upon how you think about sports. But she's like everybody else. She just does it better.
Okay.
And Angel Reese was perfectly on her grounds. Angel Reese is a Baltimore kid. She grew up in the city. She's not taking that from anybody. And she could back it up. So it's street basketball. It's wonderful. It's great for the game. And guess what? Everybody's talking about that a lot more than they're talking about the men's game. And that's because the women's game has the game.
Yes.
Has the stars, has the style, has everything. Women's basketball is great. And if you just got introduced to it, good for you.
Yeah. And John Cena, same.
Now we know from, I'm in Connecticut. We watch women's basketball all the time. We know how good it is. And we know how good these teams are.
All right.
They'd have to be to beat us.
Yes. Well, I guess so. And we'll see the test of it tonight.
Yep.
And all right. And then we're finally done with basketball for a bit.
Right. But anyway, the day after basketball, of course, we have all this other stuff going on.
Parades. Yes. Elections.
Elections.
Arraignments.
Huge, important elections. And there's really interesting review of turnout. Madison, Wisconsin is just turning out like gangbusters. And the local political scientists are saying, hey, abortion may have something to do with it. Might actually sort of be on the ballot still. People still might care.
You're so wrong or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the WOW counties, Ozaukee, Crucial, Waukesha, and Washington are turning out as well. But so is the city of Milwaukee. Madison is leading the way, though. The other, Democratic strongholds are all turning out. But, you have to appreciate the fact that some of these really high turnout places quite literally have populations of 650 people.
Well, it's easy to track you down and shame you into turning out.
Well, if it's a thing, it's a thing. So let me give you an example. Here's the highest turnout in Wisconsin so far. And early voting ended yesterday, so everything's about tomorrow now.
It's no longer
highest turnout in Wisconsin. Sherwood Hills in Dane County. This is a Democratic area, as you'll see in a minute. But everything in Dane is Democrat. Everything in Milwaukee is Democrat. Ozaukee is Republican somewhat. And Presque Isle in Vilas is really Republican. Okay, so Shorewoods, Dane, 28%. They went for Biden 91.8.
Okay.
That's the highest turnout for municipalities. Bayside in Milwaukee, 26%. They went for Biden 71.28.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Shorewood in Milwaukee is number 3 at 26%. They went Biden 83.16. You see a pattern here?
Yes.
McFarland in Dane went 24%, and they were Biden 70-28. So the strong Biden areas, in other words, are turning out really well.
Okay, is that good enough?
Mequon, Trump 50-48. That's in Ozaukee. So that's like a mixed area.
Yeah.
That's a 24% coming in number 5. It's the only municipality of any size that was Republican in the last election, Trump-Biden. And the thing is, with early voting, and this goes both ways, of course, is you know who's turning out.
Yes, right.
You know where they're turning out from. You do not know who they're voting for. Just like in Georgia.
Yeah, unless they show up in T-shirts. But even then,
but Dan Kelly, the quasi-Republican, it's a nonpartisan race where everybody knows which party's which. Dan Kelly, the quasi-Republican, is not that popular in the WOW counties. They wanted the opponent in the primary to win Doro. So whether or not they are actually voting for Kelly or whether they're voting for Protasewicz based on the abortion issue is unknown. What we do know is that they're turning out. Number 6, Maple Bluff and Dane, 23% turnout. Biden, 71-28. Number 7, Middleton and Dane, 23% turnout. Biden, 79. Trump, 19 in the last election. Whitefish Bay in Milwaukee, 23% turnout. Biden, 70. Trump, 28. So most of these areas are actually pretty heavily Biden. And then coming up at number 9, and that's all we have, is Presque Isle. Trump, 57-43. That's the one that has 650 residents.
It's an aisle.
Well, it's a,
maybe
it's a vacation community, among other things. But the point here is that you can't tell from the early vote whether or not you're going to win. But you generally can tell from the early vote when your side is going to get blown out.
Okay.
If these top 9 hadn't been strong Biden areas, you'd shake your head and say we're going to lose.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, that didn't happen, so you can't say that.
I was gonna, but all right, now I'm not gonna. You're right.
Right. So, these are pretty encouraging numbers for Democrats without guaranteeing a win. Most of the professionals, political scientists, and the like, who are looking at the numbers say, look, this is not a slam dunk win. They're certainly not turning out as much as they did in the jungle primary that got these two into a runoff. Well, actually, it's a little bit more than that, but not as much as 2020 when there was actually an election. So where does that stand? We don't know, but probably on balance, it's Protasewicz's race to lose. And the numbers here do not change that opinion.
No.
So that's where things stand. We'll find out tomorrow.
All right.
Chicago, I don't know how to rate Chicago. It's pretty much a toss-up with Paul Vallis, who is the conservative Dem, probably has a slight edge.
Okay.
But Brandon Johnson, the center-left guy, has been making strides ever since the primary that put them into a runoff. So it's really hard to game out what happens. Either way, frankly, I just don't find it quite as interesting a race as the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. And both of those, important as that Supreme Court race is, and it is really, really important, it's all going to take a back seat to Trump's indictment, which is going to be tomorrow afternoon at 2:15.
Arraignment, yes.
Arraignment, sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll move on to
probably
a
no
funny
more shots for the public. Because if you release them, Trump will put them on T-shirts and sell them. Literally.
Yeah,
probably
I'm sure.
No handcuffs, because same.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then he wanted to give a media eval. Make yourself a bail.
Oh, yes. Okay, right.
Right, and we get to evaluate it. So, and the judge said, it's too security, can't do it. And so what's going to happen is he's going to fly back to Mar-a-Lago and then give a statement of some sort tomorrow night in prime time.
Nice rally
Now,
speech.
the interesting things about that is, okay, fine. Will the judge allow him, or will it be a gag order? This is supposedly a tough judge.
Okay.
And if he does get allowed to speak, and he does decide to speak in prime time, who carries it and under what circumstance?
Yeah, and what does the
full
lawyer
statement, just the highlights? What have we learned? How do you do it, compared to a rally?
Same.
And then, by the way,
yes,
when he's arraigned, we actually get to find out what the charges are.
That's true, too.
Which
we don't know
nobody
yet.
knows. And so you have 24 more hours of,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the weakest case. How do you know? You haven't seen the charges. Well, I don't know how they're going to pull this off because, how do you know? You haven't seen the charges.
Right. There were hints along the way about what might be happening just in terms of who got called in to see the grand jury.
David Pecker.
Who had to go twice. Right. He was.
What if it's more than just Stormy Daniels?
There was that rumor floating. I did notice that on Friday that someone was saying there's evidence of payments to another woman. And I mean, there have been others that he had tried to cover up. There was, I don't know if I can remember, but there was somebody that...
There was Karen McDougal,
yes,
there
that's
was Stormy
right.
Daniels, and then there was rumors of yet another person.
Okay, excellent. Well, where there's one, there's two, and where there's two, there's probably 5 or 15. We'll find out how many of them they know about and exactly how they style the charges, and if they stack them up one on top of the other just to make it harder.
Does that bring it into RICO territory?
Very possibly.
And that's a completely different ball of wax compared to campaign finance violation, which everybody's assuming that that's all there is.
Yeah. Okay. Should be an exciting time.
Right.
And,
but we'll know in a day. So, by the time we talk Wednesday, we should know a little bit more about what those charges are. We won't see the evidence.
No.
But we might hear the charges. Meanwhile, I hear, via Lawrence O'Donnell, that you can expect the indictments in Georgia in first week of May.
Okay.
Because that's how long things take.
All right. Well, that's only about a month away. So, I mean, all the writing about, oh, gosh,
it's
why
April,
should they go first?
It's a short month.
Yeah. I mean, compared to March, say, shorter by a day.
Yep.
But,
it's not
already
February,
run two off the
it's
clock,
pretty short.
Yeah.
So that's not really all that long, and we have a lot of other stuff to stew in. Now, here's a case, before we get to Leslie Stahl, of Chuck Todd actually doing a good job.
Oh, well
nobody would have thought that Chuck Todd did a good job and Leslie Stahl did a bad job, but here it is.
Okay.
This is from Huffington Post. Chuck Todd presses ex-Manhattan DA on why he didn't charge Trump in the past.
Okay.
Very straightforward question. Why didn't you charge the hush money case? Why didn't you ever charge it in 2018, 2019, 2020? Todd asked Cyrus Vance, who was Manhattan DA from 2010 until the end of 2021. And Vance says he was probing it, and then Cyrus Vance says the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York caused his office to stand down. I was asked to stand down in our investigation, which had commenced involving the Trump Organization. And as somebody who respects that office a great deal, I did so. Now, who was president in 2018, 2019, 2020? Remind me.
Unclear at that point, but allegedly the guy they were investigating.
Yeah, so, what does that mean? And is that part of the investigation? Now, the hush money payoff was made ahead of the 2016 election. Many Republicans claim the current Manhattan DA has political motivations. And Todd also pressed Vance about the uncertainties of prosecuting hush money payoffs as a felony, which is an interesting question because Vance has done this before. One of the things they do in New York is specialize in financial crimes because it's the financial hub of the universe.
Yes, so they commit a lot of them.
Yes. And Vance noted his office had filed cases of false documentation before. They've elevated them to felonies when federal statutes were involved. It's never been done that I know of with federal election law. But I think the question is not so much why didn't I do it or why we did do it, but why this DA is doing it. And that really requires us to be patient and to wait, I would add, until tomorrow.
Yes, right.
I mean, that's not a long time.
Go crazy. All right, well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I did have that same question. I didn't think Chuck Todd would be the guy to get the answers. But,
right. Leslie Stahl, on the other hand, did this awful interview of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I did watch some of.
Okay, so you know.
I watched the highlights. I watched the part where Greene brought up the Democratic Party being a party of pedophiles, and Joe Biden in particular.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Being responsible.
We should
and
know
that's,
about that.
Part of the reaction here. And this is a review from Poynter, which is a journalistic organization, says, overall, it felt as if the pushback was light and not persistent, at least based on what made it to air. Marjorie Taylor Greene was able to deflect questions, give non-answers, and escape any real accountability for some of her outrageous and unproven views. For example, Stahl asked Greene about Greene's opinion that the U.S. should have a Christian government, and Stahl said, the Constitution, the very First Amendment, prohibits having a religion. And Greene said, yeah, but the Founding Fathers quoted the Bible.
Aha. Good enough.
And that was it. No follow-up.
Okay.
At least not one that was shown on air. That's one example. That's how much the story went. Greene supporters, or even those who don't follow her closely, came away thinking, okay, she's a little extreme, but not that bad. And those who already didn't like her had their opinions confirmed, but likely were frustrated by how she was portrayed. In other words, the fear that many had about the piece going in, that it would normalize Greene, likely came to fruition. And in the end, Greene absolutely should be profiled by 60 Minutes, but not the way they did it. And really, that's the complaint.
It's supposed to be scary.
And people like John Harwood, Tom Nichols, I mean, there's some, professional media watchers, not just me, who said, this is awful. This is garbage. That was their words.
Okay.
And it was.
I'll trust them.
And see, here's the thing. This is from Semaphore, to flesh this out a little bit. Fake News No More, Marjorie Taylor Greene's Journey to 60 Minutes. And it's, in effect, cataloging and chronicling how Marjorie Taylor Greene went from, I'm making a lot of noise, to, on the advice of my Republican seniors, maybe I should figure out how to use the media to get to where I want. So I'll lighten it up a little bit, and I will play them, and I will use them, and they will let me, and I will get away with it. And that's what the damn article is, and that's what they did on 60 Minutes, and that's why it's so frustrating. You are being used. She is using you.
That's bad news. And she's not really able to use much.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Ed Roots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us. We're still shaking our heads over the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene exists, much less that she was interviewed on national television and comes away winning against 60 Minutes, which used to scare people to death to have to do a 60 Minutes interview. You'd never can't get away with anything with these guys. But
well, here's a piece from Daily Beast. Quote, in voiceover, Stahl went on to call Greene smart and fearless, and ended the segment by pondering the question whether the secessionist QAnon adjacent lawmaker would be able to expand her brash MTG brand beyond the right-wing populist base.
That's no good.
And they, the most frustrating part is they think they did a good job, which you could tell because Mika Brzezinski was defending Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes today. It's important to get Marjorie Taylor Greene on the air so you could hear what she thinks, because everybody's going to walk away thinking she's crazy, which is such bullshit. It's so naive. It's like they've learned nothing. In fact, I was talking about Trump, but I started the pundit roundup this morning by saying, looking at the Trump coverage, shocked and defiant, how Trump is responding to unprecedented indictments, says the Washington Post. And I characterized that as Al Capone's murder victims could not be reached for comment, but here's how he felt about that tax evasion conviction. Said one person familiar with his thinking. I mean, you've learned nothing. You've learned absolutely nothing since 2016. And normalizing these folks is a thing, and you're doing it, and they are using you.
And even worse from my perspective is the idea that not only have you learned nothing, but you defend your having learned nothing with
defend
nothing.
your colleagues who have learned nothing.
I mean, that's crazy. And I mean, honestly, if you could get an honest answer out of her, I almost wish I was there on the air, right? Mika Brzezinski saying, well, it's important to put her on the air. All right, all that, being said, it's important to maybe expose the country to what's going on here. But, one, there should be some context. And two, did Leslie Stahl do a good job? Mika, is Marjorie Taylor Greene smart? Is that right? Is she smart? She's loud. She's brash. I know. Is she smart? Because she said she was smart. Is Leslie right or is Leslie wrong? I mean, that's it. It comes down to that.
She played Stahl.
I guess so. I mean, that's not necessarily smart. That really says, of course, much more about Leslie Stahl than anybody else, except now you say the same thing about Mika Brzezinski. But if you think, and there's also a difference between media savvy and smart. I mean, you might have more respect for somebody who you thought was completely out to lunch if they can also play 60 Minutes, but they can be also out to lunch at the same time. But yeah, no, she's not smart. You've reached the wrong conclusion, and then that was your summation. You're wrong. That doesn't make her smart. It doesn't make her any dumber, but she is who she is.
It does mean you got played.
Yeah.
And, your job is not to get played.
You can't.
It's part and parcel of your job. It's probably one of the single most important things in your job description.
Yeah, well,
probably number 2. Number 1 is get the facts out. Number 2, don't get played.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's too bad. And I mean, the evidence was right before you. You got the First Amendment point correct, and her answer to the First Amendment was, well, some of them quoted the Bible, and that's not a smart answer. You can't grade that answer as smart and say we just gave her a history test, a civics test. She failed it, but she's smart. She's not smart. She's a failure.
We pick on media people, and I think
now you've
justifiably
said she's
so.
smart. Now everybody will say she's smart because you said she's smart. Now I'm angry. Yes,
but let me give you an example of bad criticism of media.
Okay.
They shouldn't be criticized for this. They actually do much better than you say. One of my prime examples is when people say, "Oh, the Fox poll, it's Fox." Well, actually, the Fox poll is very good. It's an independent poll that
they get themselves
one of the best
in trouble.
pollsters in the country. All right, here's another, though. Michael Sokolow, who is an academic, communication and journalism, University of Maine, 2019 Fulbright scholar, reminds us, with the historic and unprecedented indictment of a former president coming this week, I think we should recognize the media titan whose publication earned the Pulitzer Prize in 2019 for the big story that first exposed it. You know who that media titan is?
No.
Rupert Murdoch. It came from the Wall Street Journal reporting side, which I tell people all the time is quite different than the opinion side.
You do mention that. Okay, yeah. So that
Wall Street Journal wins Pulitzer for investigation into Trump hush money payments, and this is a story which is surprisingly in the Wall Street Journal from April 15, 2019.
Well,
a series of articles that detailed hush money payments to 2 women who said they had affairs with President Trump.
Okay, so definitely
and
two.
Again, that's the McDougal and Stormy Daniels. So we know about them. Whether there's others remain to be seen, but they don't talk about that. They just talk about the reporters who did all the work, which is great. So yeah, sometimes the media does really well, and sometimes they do what they do. Now let's take a peek. Here's another one. This is, and this is right from the Pundit Roundup. So let me give you the piece from Associated Press so it's easier for you to find.
All right, sure. Not like John
It's entitled New York, City of Trump's Dreams, Delivers His Comeuppance.
Oh, we'll see.
First paragraph. His name has been plastered on this city's tabloids, bolted to its buildings, cemented to a special breed of brash New York confidence. Now, what Donald Trump do to return to the place that put him on the map, the city he loved is poised to deliver his comeuppance.
All right.
You think that's sort of okay, right?
Yeah.
And SB Date says, no. That's the first paragraph.
That's right.
This should have been the lead.
Okay.
The second paragraph.
I'm ready.
Rejected by its voters, ostracized by its protesters, rebuked by its jurors, the people of New York have one more thing to splash Trump's name on, indictment number 71543-23.
Okay.
That's a lead. That's how it should have been presented.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's in there, but it's not
there.
first. That's
But what people click the headlines?
Yeah.
No, they read the headlines. That's it.
I don't know. Well, comeuppance. Yeah, that's not exactly the strongest word I've ever heard, but all right.
You know, what you don't get from the first paragraph,
What don't I get?
and you do get from the second paragraph,
Yeah.
is how much people in Manhattan loathe Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean,
And that is the story.
It was
and
always
it's so
true.
big a story. It's so part and parcel of the story. People like Al Sharpton, who know him, say, you got to understand this about Trump. He's being humiliated in Manhattan, the one place that he doesn't want that to happen.
Yes.
He's an outer borough guy. He's a Queens guy. Right? And the people in Manhattan have never accepted him, and he knows that, and he hates it.
Yeah, it's been
And he wants to lord it over them, and he certainly did when he was president. And now he has to come back and be humiliated by the very same people that he was trying to, you can't see me.
Yeah, well, that is very interesting. And to bring it again back to wrestling, right? You know, it was always the case that he was loathed in New York, but he was loathed in a very weird way.
Especially in Manhattan.
Yes, but the loathed, and there were certainly fans when he was a clown, anyway. And I guess even when he was president, there were certainly some.
The heels always have
But
fans.
yes, that's exactly it. There were people who hated him, but loved to read about him because he was like a wrestling heel. He was just this jerk who, you know, made incredible crazy brags about himself all the time. That's what made him initially popular on Twitter.
You don't even realize how good it is until it sinks in a couple of weeks later.
Yeah. Well, pretty amazing. I don't know. This whole thing is, well, it's
So
exciting.
here's Bloomberg.
There's more. Okay.
Trump weighs bid to shift New York criminal case to Staten Island. But they actually like him.
Okay.
Former president's lawyers may seek to move out of Manhattan. Legal experts say defendants don't have the right to a friendly jury.
Yeah. It's not.
Right? You have the right to a friendly judge. They do that all the time. It's clear Trump would actually rather be in Texas,
Sure.
where he could pick his judge, but that's the federal level. This is a state thing, so no, you can't do
It's
that.
tough. Shopping for. There's a lot you can shop for. Forum shopping, judge shopping, jury shopping. You're not supposed to go shopping. It's not supposed to be like that.
You have the right to
can't
a
know.
fair jury. You don't have the right to a friendly jury.
Right. That's true. And there's nothing that indicates that, well, there's no connection to the case in Staten Island.
Right. And whether it's the grand jury in New York, and don't give me this stuff about ham sandwich recipes, or whether it's the special grand jury in Georgia, followed by the regular grand jury who does the indictment.
Yes. Decaf and regular.
Grand juries are normal people, your peers, who are just trying to do their best to do their job.
Yes.
Right?
Or get
And
back
that's
to their
Trump's
job.
biggest problem with it. He doesn't want them to do their job, but more importantly, he doesn't see them as his peers. He doesn't think he has any peers.
No doubt about that.
That's how he got in this place in the first
I
place.
don't understand. I do a lot of business.
So
These
the grand
people don't
juries
know.
are great. They do their job, and they are fair. They try to be fair. Maybe they succeed, maybe they don't. Maybe they get it right, maybe they don't. But they're just regular old people trying to do their best. And the idea that you can go around jury shopping doesn't make any sense, because no matter where you go, you're going to find normal, regular people trying to do their best.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like Staten Island is full of people who, you know, just hate the law entirely and just love Donald Trump to death. You'll find people who, take it seriously, and we'll see, hey, this is a mountain of evidence. And by the way, it's kind of what we always thought about Donald Trump. Some of us thought it was cool that he ran around having affairs and paying hush money, but I mean, he did do it. Is that the question? Did he do it? Yeah, he did it. So I don't know. Even the fans aren't gonna deny that he did it.
Well, Trump said he didn't do it.
Yeah, but nobody
His
believes
fans
that.
say, yeah, he did it, but he had to because he was being blackmailed.
Okay.
And he only did it to protect Melania.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Of course.
And that's the kind of thing where if you put on 60 Minutes, you go, oh, wow, and then you move on without any follow-up questions.
That's interesting.
That's how you get used.
He's smart.
He's smart. I'm smart. I don't pay
that.
taxes.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell
That's
that
what
to
he
Alvin
said.
Bragg.
Right. Oh, yeah. Please.
Please.
On the record. And he did say that.
Under
That
oath.
makes
Tell
me
him under oath if
smart.
That's what you do.
Okay. Yeah, that's the next case.
Right. So this one also reminds me of Wall Street Journal and sort of the work they do. You may have heard there's a journalist named Evan Gershkovich.
He's a wrestler, right?
No, he's a reporter, and he just reported on the fact that Moscow's economy isn't doing too well. The Russians didn't like it, so they picked him up, and now he's in prison.
Is that what he reported on?
Yeah.
Okay. I did hear a different story about him, but equally bad in terms of like, hey, don't arrest him. That's not right. But that's Russia.
So the Wall Street Journal now made all of Evan's reporting free to read. So you can go back and look at all the stuff he did.
That's good. The reporting's free.
I have the
He's
link
not.
on the Pundit Roundup. And the Moscow Times, which is not necessarily a friendly to Moscow time, writes, Evan Gershkovich's arrest means no journalist can feel safe in Russia today.
Well, that's
the
right.
early warning system for journalists involved two key institutions, the Foreign Ministry and Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson. The FSB also played a role in the Kremlin's cat-and-mouse game with foreign journalists, as it was the agency's counterintelligence department that formally revoked press visas. So what would happen is if you reported on things they didn't like, they'd revoke your visa and kick you out. That's what normally you expect. You don't expect to be in prison.
Yeah, kicked
So people
out.
think he picked them up. They picked them up because they want to trade him for somebody because, you know, that's what they did with
certainly.
Brittany Griner.
Yeah, that's what they do.
So my point about telling you this, it's an interesting story in and of itself.
Yes.
Is that journalism is difficult. Sometimes it's dangerous. There are people who do a really good job. He's one of them. When we pick on Leslie Stahl and how they cover Trump, it isn't because we have nothing good to say about journalism. We have a lot of good things to say when they do their job. Mm-hmm. And we can admire those who do their jobs under difficult and dangerous circumstances and still think the Trump whisperers are not in that category.
Yeah, well, sure. Sometimes they're different people. Sometimes it's the same person, and some people can do a good job one day and a bad job another day.
But since Gershkovich's reporting is reporting for the Wall Street Journal, it's another reminder that the Pulitzer Prize-winning Wall Street Journal has pretty good news, straight reporting.
That's true. Maybe
Even
they
if
would
their
like to
opinion
trade him
section
for
sucks.
Rupert. Yeah, if they were interested in a trade for Rupert Murdoch, we'll give them.
Oh, and by the way, Fox's polling is very good.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, remember that a lot of the trouble that Fox finds itself in is because the Fox executives were angry that the Fox polling people found the right answer.
Yeah. Or they're political professionals anyway. They're numbers
that's
people.
true, right? Yeah, I guess it could be different folks. But I imagine they have something to do with one another. But maybe not. But yeah, they're quants anyway, I guess.
Yeah, the numbers people. Good. So they were really mad because they weren't following the facts.
Yeah. And then told them to shut up.
They were not following the facts without, as they like to say, without fear or favor. And that's why Fox executives are mad at them. We want you to fear us.
Have some fear.
We want you to favor.
Right.
You weren't doing it, so we're mad at you.
Too bad. All right. Well, that is pretty weird.
So let's talk about something tangential here.
Tangential.
This is from Politico. And again, you have to understand and appreciate the way they write it and how they slant things. They can tell you the straight facts and still slant stuff.
Yeah.
Their title, their headline. The data is clear. The indictment makes Republicans like Trump more popular. I just have more. I think it's.
I see.
What did I mean there? No, the indictment makes Republicans like Trump more.
Oh, I see.
That's what they're trying to say. I like him even more now.
Yeah.
If I put even more, even would be better. The data is clear. The indictment makes Republicans like Trump even more. There were a number of public surveys conducted in the lead up to the indictment, and they all showed a similar story. Now, we were talking about this in terms of Ron Santos' decline, but you could spin it in terms of Trump's ascension.
Okay.
In a number of surveys released over the past 2 weeks, and this is the bolded part that they gloss over, most Americans said then rumored charges against Trump were fair and serious.
Okay.
In an NPR PBS NewsHour Marist College poll released last week, 56% of Americans said that taken together, the investigations into Trump's conduct were fair. 55% of voters in a Quinnipiac University poll out this week said the probe into Trump's alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels was serious. But among Republicans, those numbers are all reversed. And then, of course, they concentrate on the Republican stuff. Mm-hmm. And the same stuff came from this really interesting Navigator research piece, which was out on March 31st. I don't think people have paid enough attention to. Again, all of this in the pundit roundup. But listen to this. Yes, Americans believe many of Trump's actions were criminal or wrong, including top of the list. This is what I found significant. Top of the list. Yes. Stormy Daniels payment, 76% say it was either criminal or wrong.
All right. It's a huge mistake to lead with that.
Top of the list.
That's
Using
weird.
Campaign funds for personal expenses, 73.
Okay.
Georgia election obstruction, 73.
Okay, again, should really, I mean, it's tied.
Obstructing
really
January 6th vote count, 70.
That's pretty close. Why is it less? But it's...
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
This isn't really serious. You should do something really serious. The public thinks the Stormy Daniels one is top of the list serious.
I don't know why. Maybe just because it's happening.
I have some ideas.
Oh, okay.
It might be familiarity. It might be clarity, since it's really easy to understand.
True.
I mean, with Georgia election obstruction, it's not he said, she said. With obstructing the January 6th vote count, you have a whole host of people saying, well, it's, they only pick the bad parts to show you on the January 6th committee. Some of it is like, I really don't understand it. It's super duper complicated. You'd think that, and the legal professionals think that the Mar-a-Lago documents case is a slam dunk. So that should be like, why isn't that top three?
Yeah.
And the answer is because there's still people who think, well, he declassified it in his mind, so it probably doesn't really count the same way.
I guess.
Stormy Daniels is pretty clear. It's never good to do that. There's no possible way you could justify it.
Unless you just
say
it's
wrong.
Good and I like it. Yeah, I mean, good, I guess. That's fine. And, the one
I'm just saying, if you want to go with this, well, it's the least serious. You lost that battle.
That's
with the
interesting.
Public. The public doesn't think that at all.
You lost the snap poll on that one. I'm surprised, too, but I'll take it.
Now, periodic reminder from David Frum on April 1st. MAGA doesn't represent America. Trump investigations. Which comes closer to your view about the investigations into former President Trump? The investigations are... fair,
fun.
56. A witch hunt, 41. Is 41 too high? Yeah. But most of the public think that they are fair. If you had 56-41 in an election result, you'd say that's a landslide.
That's true, you would. You'd say I have the largest crowd ever.
So Frum says, look, it's okay when newspaper reporters, remember that's our theme today, say that the U.S. is deeply split, you have to make clear it's not evenly split.
I mean, that's true. You can have it. The split can be deep. It goes all the way through.
It is. Well, it's a terribly deep split.
Not
because
balanced.
The people who think Trump is okay and did the right thing are never going to agree with the people who think he ought to be in jail and he did something wrong.
Right.
But those are not equal pots.
No.
I mean, the people overall, total number of people in the country, adults, who support Trump on this are probably in the 19-20% range, total.
They're probably in the 1920s.
Half the people don't vote. And, you can get 70% of Republicans, and it's still, that doesn't even take you to 25.
Yeah. Stay there. All right. Well, true. It's worth noting, even if it is David Frum. But it's still...
He gets a lot of things right, just like Charlie Sykes says. The never-Trumpers get a lot of things right. They may not have a big constituency in the Republican Party, maybe 15 people total. Or
they do have
the total population of Presque Isle, but...
Yes.
But there it is.
Right. All right. Well, I'll agree with it. I mean, and it's always a good point to remind it that as deep as the split is, that is an interesting thing, like just getting the wrong dimension there for reporters to say, well, look how deep this split is. It must be an even split. So therefore
we have to do both sides.
No, it isn't.
Well, no, it's an uneven split. So you don't have to do both sides equally because it's not equal.
And people are, and they know, I imagine they must know at this point that people are going to infer, if you just say the country is deeply divided.
That must mean 50-50.
Yeah. That's what deeply means. People are a little, that's
off
divided. On their statistics. Right. That's evenly divided. Deeply divided.
If you didn't divide
it
that way, you'd go back and throw the wood away and you'd split it again.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It's just, it's pretty wild.
You're just almost obligated to clarify that.
Yes.
That's what people mean by adding context.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Deeply divided. Okay. Well, that's all. I don't know. It's deep.
Here's another one. This is a follow-up with sort of the same theme here. Ron Brownstein writing in The Atlantic, unfortunately, paywall.
Oh.
Trump's legal problems are putting the GOP in a vice. Hey, did you hear? Asa Mentham? Asa Hutchinson is running for president and thinks Trump should drop out because of the indictment.
I have heard that.
Now, he may be polling at 1% and he may not be going anywhere and he may have zero chance of winning.
Right. Maybe.
But it's a crack in the dam. He said it. So did Chris Christie. Now you have two people potentially running for president who said Trump should resign or pull out or,
do something,
do something other than run because the indictment disqualifies him. Once some people say it, other people can say it.
That's true. What is Nikki Haley saying?
Nikki Haley is saying, I support Trump while I run against him, so you should vote for me. Which is the same thing that Ron DeSantis is saying, which is why DeSantis is dropping like a stone. Because everybody, even in the Republican Party, knows that's stupid.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just thought it was sort of remarkable and interesting that somebody has to enter the race to say, it's bad to be indicted. People who are indicted should
Now, Asa
not be
Hutchinson
trusted.
is a terrible person. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
He's done some terrible things. He supported some terrible policies. He shakes his head and says this is really bad and then signs them as governor.
Yes.
Done a lot of voter suppression in particular, I'm thinking of.
I mean, Arkansas has a worse governor now, so he looks better, but he was terrible.
But, it's important that he said that so he at least, puts a chink in the dam.
I mean, he's one of the last Republicans who will say sometimes things are against the law and you should not do them, and if you do them, you're bad.
So Ron Brownstein says the dilemma for the Republican Party is that Donald Trump's mounting legal troubles may be simultaneously strengthening him as a candidate for the GOP presidential nomination and weakening him as a potential general election nominee.
Yeah.
In a way, I'm okay with that. The important thing is that he loses the general election.
Yes, but
it'd be even nicer if he would lose the primary, but I don't see that happening at the moment. In the days leading up to the indictment of the former president, which Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg announced 2 days ago, a succession of polls showed Trump significantly increasing his lead over Ron DeSantis, his closest competitor, also known as Governor Scott Walker of Florida. Yet recent surveys have also signaled that this criminal charge and other potential indictments from ongoing investigations could deepen the doubts about Trump among the suburban swing voters who decisively reject him and powered surprisingly strong performances by Democrats in 2018, 2020, and 2022. It is definitively a conundrum. It's definitely a conundrum.
Oh.
Definitely a conundrum that this potentially helps him in the primary, sinks the party's chances to win the general, said Mike Duhame, a GOP strategist who advises former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. I think Duhame was Christie's chief of staff or spokesperson.
Duhame?
Definitely a Chris Christie Republican. I think then he went up to New Hampshire to run the party there or do stuff. I'm not sure what.
Maybe.
But Duhame was a Christie guy. This better positions in the primary our worst candidate for the general election. Now, he's going to say that because he's a Christie guy, and Christie's also going to run, or wants to run at least. So, you have to keep all of that in mind.
Okay.
Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman, Washington Post,
Yes.
The unhinged GOP defense of Trump is the real test for our democracy. Voters often take their cues from elites. That's why it's important that Asa Hutchinson say something and Chris Christie say something. And why it's so important that Kevin McCarthy says nothing. The degree to which senior Republicans acknowledge the law should be applied to Trump, did you ever think you'd miss Mitch McConnell? He'd have something to say about this. He's just recovering from a concussion and broken ribs. Just as it is to everybody else, will help shape how accepting voters, especially Republican ones, are of the outcome. Are you hearing any acknowledgement? Even worse, some elite right-wing media are hinting at violence. People better be careful, and that's all I'll say about that, snarled Fox News host Jesse Waters. His colleague Tucker Carlson warned that this is probably not the best time to give up your AR-15.
Okay.
Not to be too subtle about it, the position implied here is that the price of social peace is absolute impunity for Trump. The insistence that Trump must be kept above the law, no matter his wrongdoing, courses through all these GOP responses. Media accounts should centralize that fact. This appalling civic conduct is itself a major story. Yes, a prosecution of a president is unprecedented. Well, might even be unpresidential. Who knows? You could argue that. But as a new post-peace demonstrates, many other advanced democracies, including Israel, Italy, France, and South Korea, have seen prosecutions of former presidents and prime ministers. And as far as I would remind you of financial crimes, New York does it all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's where
there's
the crime
nothing
is.
wrong with this.
That's why Willie Sutton robs banks. That's where the money is. So if you're going to look for a financial crime prosecution, look to the Manhattan DA's office. That's where it happens. Wall Street.
We prosecute financial crime here in Manhattan because that's where the financial crime is.
Right. And now that it's the end of the hour, the final piece, tiny amount of time we'll devote to it, but just fascinating. You heard about the war blogger, the Russian military blogger who was blown up in St. Petersburg. Probably an inside job, say the Ukrainians. Okay. But a woman wanted to go see him, and they wouldn't let her in with the statue of this blogger that she brought for him to honor him.
Statue.
So to get through security, she handed it off. It went to him. He held it. It blew up and killed him. It is a fantastic story.
Wow. I mean,
it would be rejected
from
every Tom Cruise movie you ever saw as being ridiculous.
I mean, it's the Bill Murray.
Every John le Carré novel. I can't write this.
Crazy.
But it happened.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am astonished by this story that Greg snuck in at the last second. The statue that was the statue have a bomb in it? Was it statue made of plastic explosive like the little rabbit and gopher figures that Bill Murray's character made in Caddyshack to blow up the gopher? I'm curious about how this whole thing came off, but wow, that's really something. I don't think we really need to go any further into the story necessarily. I mean, guy killed by a bomb, but amazing security failure, but I don't know. All right, well, that's weird. What's the I'm gonna zoom in on this picture here. Yeah, bad branding moment here for Century 21. Sorry to report to you that the photo that the New York Times uses on Twitter anyway to illustrate the linked story about this bombing has got a picture, I guess, of the did they say it was a bar? Was it a bar or a restaurant that they met in? And I guess it's in an office building of some kind that has other offices up top, and maybe the ground floor is a cafe or a bar or whatever it was supposed to be. And but it says there's branding available, visible on it. So Century 21, I guess, has an office there in what does it say? I can't quite make out the rest of it, but yeah, that's the Century 21 logo. So sorry for those guys getting their branding on a bombing story. Not great, but that's not the actual story here. All right, let's see. There's a few more items here. Greg sends some interesting detail, I guess, has pulled it from the story. Russian media and military bloggers say Tatarsky, is that his name? Tatarsky was meeting members of the public when a woman presented him with a box containing a bust of him that apparently blew up. A patriotic Russian group that organized the event said it had taken security precautions, but acknowledged those measures, quote, proved insufficient. Yes. I mean, unless you thought that she was a suicide bomber with a bomb strapped to her body, there was really no point in taking a package from this woman and then leaving her outside and bringing the bomb in. But presumably they didn't think it was a bomb, but then why not let her in? I don't know. Anyway, I guess it's what happens when you get these, I mean, I don't know what these people's backgrounds are, but it starts to strike me that maybe they're just sort of LARPing as military. You know, they put on tactical gear and pretend that they're doing something awesome, and they boss people around and push the woman around, but then they carry the bombs inside. All right, so he says, check the next paragraph here. In remarks recorded on video, a witness said a woman who identified herself as Nastya, that's nasty with an A on the end, Nastya, had asked questions and exchanged remarks with Tatarsky during the discussion. The witness, Alisa Smotrova, maybe, I don't know, quoted Nastya as saying she had made a bust of the blogger, which is odd enough, really, to trip my alarms. But anyway, but that guards asked her to leave it at the door, suspecting it could be a bomb. Well, I mean, yeah, and then what? Nastya and Tatarsky joked and laughed. She then went to the door, grabbed the bust, and presented it to Tatarsky. It was in a cafe. But okay, so they blocked what? Who? The bomb? They said, put it down, and then you come in? And then she said, ha, they thought it was a bomb, but it's really a bust. And he says, go give it to me. And she goes to the door and grabs it. Well, it did prove insufficient. That's correct. Nobody had a bomb-sniffing dog. No nothing. Or don't give him the bust, but if you want to interview him, fine. Or I don't know. Okay. Well, poor security all around. And I guess I'm glad about that in a way. It's not terrific to be cheering deaths like that, but it's a war. Somebody's going to die. And at this point, all you can do is hope it's the other people, not you. And then say, sorry. And if you'd like to see an end to this, you could stop attacking, and then the war would be over. All right. So let's see. One other thing I wanted to put out there, although I don't have any articles at the ready about it. But for those, I mean, I don't think there's very many listeners to this show who are thinking of the Manhattan indictment and arraignment to come tomorrow and saying, it's just not important. We just shouldn't care very much about the hush money payments. He's an adult, she's an adult, whatever. There's all sorts of issues. And yes, you can connect it to campaign finance and make a crime out of it. And there's even more than that. There's not only, I mean, there are actually at least two layers of, two ways in which to create a crime out of this if you look at it just right and squint at it long enough. Yes, there's the campaign finance issue. There's also the misrepresentation of the payments intentionally, including using a lawyer, an officer of the court, by God, to disguise these payments. There's the unethical part of it, the capture and kill role played by the National Enquirer. And then, of course, underlying it all, there's the possibility, and we'll have to wait and see whether the charges include anything like this, but it's long been rumored that there might have been some, terroristic threats and threats of violence that went along with this. Yes, there was hush money being paid, but there was hush money, it's one thing to say, well, I'll tell you what, I'd rather you not talk about it, and if money is what it takes to make you want to do that, I'll give you that money. But if it goes further to, and by the way, I am serious about I insist that the money, in fact, buy the silence I'm looking for. And if it doesn't, if you speak out anyway, or it gets out in some way, will be visiting you and visiting some violence upon you in some way or another, well, then that needs to be prosecuted as well. But on top of all of that, there's other things I wanted to point out. And I don't know whether you can make much more of a connection between them, but I just want to remind listeners of all the things we've learned over the years. And maybe this is nagging at you. There's something in the back of my head that makes me say, right, we were talking about, okay, there's evidence supposedly of a second woman getting payoffs and hush money. And if that second woman is Karen McDougal, then yes, we know about her already. There may be more, and that could be interesting all by itself. But Karen McDougal, we don't just want to wave a hand at that and say, oh, yeah, that's she's the Playboy playmate who would meet Trump whenever he traveled around and would meet with them in the Beverly Hills Hotel, for instance, the infamous picture of him in the bathrobe. Remember him saying, I've never owned a bathrobe. I would never wear a bathrobe. But in some other context, he was saying, I don't wear bathrobes. And here's a photo of you in the hotel bathrobes. Anyway, all very seedy and stuff. But remember that there was something else weird about the Karen McDougal affair. And if you can't remember what it is, remember that she either was in fact also dating someone else, having an extramarital affair. This man was having an extramarital affair with her. She wasn't married, I don't think, McDougal. But they were having an affair around the same time, possibly. I'm not really even 100% sure whether, how close in time it was. But just to make it, just to refresh your memory, do you remember who the other guy was who allegedly was having an affair with McDougal? And as a hint, maybe to jog your memory a little bit, there was some question about whether or not this was in fact happening, or whether it was just somebody trying to take the fall in some way for Trump and say, no, it wasn't Trump having the affair with this woman and paying her off. It was me. And you remember that was odd. Like, hey, that's an odd thing for somebody to just come out and admit to. Why would you do something like that unless it was to take the heat away somehow from Donald Trump? And I guess it kind of worked, because we all sort of kind of forgot about Karen McDougal. But you may also have sort of forgotten that the other guy claiming to have had an affair with Karen McDougal was Elliott Broidy. And now, if you're just remembering that now, you're probably saying either, oh my, yeah, that's right. And there's all this other stuff about Elliott Broidy. Or you're saying, I forgot who Elliott Broidy is. I don't remember. But Elliott Broidy, just to, make a bigger deal out of all this and make it sound like there's something maybe more, I don't know, more international intrigue involved in all this than there may actually be. Because one, we don't really know whether there was any affair between Elliott Broidy and Karen McDougal for sure. I mean, it was alleged, and I don't see why not. But we haven't, seen as thorough an investigation of that as we have over the question of whether or not there was a hush money payment for the affair with Stormy Daniels, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, Elliott Broidy was, of course, many things. And the first time around that we heard about him, we were learning about him because he was national finance co-chair of the Republican National Party alongside Steve Wynn, who was, by the way, also having affairs and paying hush money. Just kind of a strange thing to have happen over there. And two, that he is himself a lobbyist and influence peddler who did a lot of things and was involved in a lot of weird cases and a lot of strange, political subterfuge and goings on around the Trump candidacy and the Trump administration. But lately, there was, and there's more. I don't have to go back and look at the Elliott Broidy archives, but you may remember that the latest on Elliott Broidy is that he is also somehow mixed up in and embroiled in the Go Wenway situation, right? He was lobbying on Go Wenwei's behalf and was tied up also with the guy from 1MDB, is that right? The Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund. The two of them were, Broidy was working for him, right? What was his name? I can't remember his name offhand. But he was lobbying for him, lobbying the Trump administration to, what was it? Was it to return Go Wenwei to China and to chuck him out of the country? But at the same time, Wenwei was underwriting and financing so much of the Steve Bannon activity, and there's just an awful lot there. And I mean, it'd be very interesting, I think, at this point in the Stormy Daniels Trump case to exhume the Karen McDougal case and bring that back to life again. If that actually becomes part of the charging documents and brings the Elliott Broidy story back to life too, that could really be something, and that would be a real interesting avenue to explore if they haven't already explored it. And if they dumped it all at once and said, you thought this was not a particularly important place to angle to investigate or a way to lead the story here, then and then it ended up connecting to Go Wenwei and 1MDB and all of the rest of this. That would be something exciting at that. Now let's see. Scott has sent me something that I think will help us fill this out, and good thing too, because he was going to end up wanting to have a link for all of this, and I guess he found it and said, you know what, why not just add it to the mix here. A top GOP official, we're reading from BuzzFeed News here from 2018, and I'm pretty sure we read this, whether it was this article or not, maybe, I don't know. Here's what we got. Let's see. A top GOP official admitted he had an affair with the Playboy model and gave her money to terminate her pregnancy. That was another angle on it, right? The fact that there was an abortion paid for only makes it more insane. Let's see. And Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, reportedly negotiated that $1 million payoff as well. So he's almost certainly, if there's a connection to be made, he gave it to the grand jury, and maybe we just haven't heard about it until, I don't know, it would be really amazing to see that be part of the indictment. Let's see. What am I looking at here? BuzzFeed News. Tasneem Nasrullah was the reporter way back in 2018. Maybe still a reporter, maybe not necessarily with BuzzFeed News. I don't know. A top Donald Trump donor and GOP official admitted to having an affair with a former Playboy model and giving her money, reportedly facilitated by President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, to terminate her pregnancy. Which, I guess, it's another one of those incomplete stories. Like, well, wait a second. So, Broidy is a Trump donor and a GOP official, but national finance chair. Yes, it's an officialdom, but it's not enough by itself to explain how it is that he says, well, I need to pay her off to keep her quiet about the affair. I need to pay for an abortion. But Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's lawyer, should be the guy involved in negotiating this. Something's missing from that story. It's not going to be that Donald Trump says, I'm the bank of Donald Trump, and any Republican who's important enough will have his affairs and abortions paid for by me, and my attorney will fix them. That's not it. Some level of their relationship is completely missing from this version of the story. Elliott Broidy, the National Republican Committee's National Deputy Finance Chair, told BuzzFeed News in a statement, first, I would like to sincerely apologize to my wife and family. I don't know why I'm bothering this. I acknowledge I had a consensual relationship with a Playboy playmate, which was easy enough to buy, even if we didn't think it was true, at the time, because you wonder, well, what kind of person would admit to such a thing? And for one thing, this is a Trump person, so, what kind of a person would, a terrible person. And here is a terrible person. So easy, fine, to explain the transition to that. And then secondly, in that world and in many others, honestly, it's not exactly a really big drawback for a guy like Elliott Broidy, who's, not a terrifically good-looking guy or anything like that. But if he can get it printed up credibly for some reason in the newspapers, yes, I want to acknowledge I had a consensual relationship with a Playboy playmate. And especially if you didn't have that. And B, told your wife, listen, for political reasons, I'm going to have to admit to this, but it's not true. But not the worst thing in the world to go around bragging like you've had an affair with a Playboy playmate. Like, I'm going to play on the branding here. He's not going to stop by saying, I apologize to my wife and family for the hurt I've caused. I acknowledge I had a consensual relationship outside marriage. He went for the branding, the Playboy playmate. So he wasn't totally embarrassed to do that. Let's see. At the end of our relationship, this woman shared with me that she was pregnant. She alone decided that she did not want to continue, with the pregnancy, and I offered to help her financially during this difficult period. We have not spoken since that time, Broidy said. Broidy has resigned from the RNC. He's the chair and CEO of Broidy Capital Management, whatever that might be, and had previously, as national vice chair of the Trump victory campaign, previously served as national vice chair of the Trump victory campaign in 2016. Last year, he donated more than $160,000 to the RNC. Broidy admitted to the affair and pregnancy after the Wall Street Journal, there you go, Pulitzer Prize-winning Wall Street Journal, first reported Friday that in 2017, Cohen negotiated to pay $1.6 million to the former Playboy model on Broidy's behalf. That's considerably more than Stormy Daniels got. That's interesting. And it's, 1/1000th of the value of the Dominion lawsuit against Fox News. Just want to put that out there. But a lot of 1.6s in the news these days, even though this is from 2018. Last week, federal agents raided Cohen's house. Federal agents are raiding everybody's house in the Trump world. Also a hotel room and office, prompting outrage from Trump, who called it a witch hunt and a disgraceful situation, and he's indicted for it a couple of years later. On Friday, the government said in court documents that Cohen is under criminal investigation for criminal conduct that largely centers on his personal business dealings. And then I guess the focus changes to Cohen at this point. But let's see. He's been in the news for negotiating the hush agreement with Stormy Daniels. In his statement, Broidy confirmed that Cohen reached out to him after being contacted by the Playboy model's lawyer, who's also kind of a weird figure in all of this, Keith Davidson. And Keith also happens to be Stormy Daniels' former lawyer and who negotiated that settlement with Cohen. So, interesting. Daniels, whose legal name is Stephanie Clifford, is now suing Trump and Cohen to have the agreement tossed out. That was, again, back in 2018. I don't think it worked. It is unfortunate that this personal matter between two consenting adults is the subject of a national discussion just because of Michael Cohen's involvement, Broidy said. Mr. Cohen reached out to me after being contacted by this woman's attorney, Keith Davidson. Although I had not previously hired Mr. Cohen, I retained Mr. Cohen after he informed me about his prior relationship with Mr. Davidson. Cohen and Davidson did not respond to requests for comment. The settlement prohibited the unidentified Playboy model from disclosing her relationship with Broidy. The money was to be paid to her over 2 years in quarterly settlements, with the first payment due on December 1st. Daniels' current lawyer, Stormy Daniels that is, Michael Avenatti, who also landed in trouble after all this was over, appears to have knowledge of the settlement Cohen made on behalf of Broidy. And by the way, I wonder about that story and the way that ended with Michael Avenatti, too. Makes me wonder whether he really was who he said he was all along. In the last 18 months, Mr. Cohen negotiated yet another hush money NDA, this time on behalf of a prominent GOP donor who had a relationship with an LA woman, impregnated her, and then made sure she had an abortion. Okay. Anyway, that's the end of that, but that particular entry. But back from 2018, as I said. I guess I got to put this in pocket so that I make sure not to lose track of it. But anyway, thank you, Scott, for bringing that back so that we could remind everybody exactly who Elliott Broidy is and or what he had to do with Karen McDougal. But yeah, the more recent news that we've had about Elliott Broidy was in connection with the 1MDB scandal. It's weird that he's also, so he's from Broidy Capital Management, but he's kind of also an international lobbyist / fixer in general. And I guess just basically wherever the grift is, he will drift to the grift. Okay. Wow. That's pretty astonishing and something to remember. And it would be really amazing if in the course of learning the charges in the indictment, there was a connection to that. And then we would look like, hey, we're really on top of the news in this one. And I haven't seen anybody else discussing that, and they probably should, because why not? It's more interesting than the things they're discussing. And, well, let's see. Other things that we should choose to address, there's plenty. But, I think probably when it comes to we might as well at this point just wait for the arraignment and skip the commentary on the indictment because most of the commentary was so terrible. Needless to say, I think to this audience, no, I have no interest in validating any of the, oh my gosh, this is such a terrible precedent thing. They'll be indicting Democratic presidents forever now. As I saw others pointing out quite rightly on social media, this wouldn't be like the start of a tit for tat chain reaction. Republicans have been trying to indict Democratic ex-presidents and prominent Democrats, whether they were ex-presidents or not, since forever. And just specifically in the person of the Clintons, Hillary and Bill Clinton, both, they have been trying to find grounds to indict them and incriminate them for years, and they just never really have been able to put anything together. And but it's been part of their goal, and they've been trying to do that since forever. And I question where the tit for tat really comes from here. Of course, if Republicans were later to indict, Joe Biden afterwards, it's interesting because, of course, the media would at some point probably use the term tit for tat, and Republicans would deny that that's what they were doing, but then wink and say, yes, it absolutely is what we were doing. We told you ahead of time that that's what we were going to try to do, but leave out the fact that the tit for tat began before Donald Trump was ever indicted. It was just trying to indict the Clintons for being the Clintons. And no one knows which came first here and what the tit and what the tat was, but Republicans were trying to do it all along. And if we pointed that out, then they would just say, see, that just goes to prove, yes, we tried to indict the Clintons first. And that's what makes the Democrats' indictment. It wasn't the Democrats. It was just a Manhattan grand jury. Sorry. But that's what makes the Democrats' efforts to indict Trump the actual tit for tat. They were trying to get back at us for the thing that we were trying to do but never succeeded in doing. Doesn't really make any particular sense, but that doesn't mean that it would stop them from making that claim. Okay, let's see. Other things to share. There's plenty. Let's see. Why not? We'll do a little bit more on this because I've got a recommended article in front of me, which might mean that they actually did a good job in discussing the topic. And the suggestion comes via ye old Twitter hashtag. Yes, there are still people there using it, and yes, I still check it. So no judgment. I'll continue to check to see what you've had to say. And our friend Warfare Class, or Employee of the Month, is the one who offers this piece from Washington Monthly up for our consideration, except we'll have to consider it in the next segment. But it reads at the headline, Trump indictment. The blows are coming from everywhere, and he is up against many better boxers. Matthew Cooper's headline here, the subheader reading, Jennifer Taub is one of the nation's top experts on white-collar financial crimes. Why does that matter? Because she's offering her take here on the former president's imminent arrest, at least arraignment anyhow, his chances in court, and why she's celebrating. And I guess the arraignment will include at least the technical arrest, right? He gets booked even if he's not handcuffed, and he's hit with all the charges, and, in all likelihood released on his own recognizance, which is probably the worst possible recognizance you could think of. Couldn't we come up with some other recognizance? Because there's not even a lot of cognition going on behind this cognizance, let alone the recognizance. Anyway. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we read you the body of the piece here by Matthew Cooper interviewing Jennifer Taub about the indictments? Sure, why not? We've kind of committed to doing that. Jennifer Taub, a contributing writer for the Washington Monthly, which is where we're reading from now, knows a white-collar financial criminal when she sees one, and Trump's collars, by the way, are orange. A professor at the Western New England University School of Law, Wieslaw, I don't know, Winius, I don't know, how would you abbreviate? I can't, they don't do it this way, but Winius, I guess, right? Western New England University School of Law, okay. Anyway, she's the author of Big Dirty Money. That sounds about right. And has written regularly about Donald Trump's legal woes for this magazine. The Harvard Law School graduate and podcast host, that's the credential that matters, has also done interviews with me, not me, but me, Matthew Cooper, her regular editor. When news of the 45th president's indictment by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg startled the nation, did it? Really? On the evening of March 30th, I knew I had to speak with Taub, especially at an awkward moment when we know that Trump will be arraigned, but the counts against him remain sealed, and we're left to game out various scenarios. Well, that's what podcasts are for, right? Here's my conversation on the night of the 30th. The transcript is edited for brevity and clarity. I reached Taub by phone at her home in Massachusetts where she was enjoying a lemon drop cocktail. Okay, important detail. Humanizes the whole thing. And the latest entry in our trend toward the reading of transcripts, which is not usually great for radio, but so far we've been batting 500 on it, which is to say that half the time it's crap. But, 500 is a pretty good batting average, as it happens. Okay, so Matthew Cooper says, I guess nobody's surprised, but that said, are you surprised? Jennifer answers, I am, because just yesterday I thought 3 weeks to get some other stuff done. And so I was utterly shocked and overjoyed to find out there had been an indictment. And I guess I felt the same way. This may sound obvious, but why are you overjoyed? Jennifer says, I think it's because this is somebody who in his entire adult life has been criminal adjacent. And finally, the law caught up with him. And as someone who wrote a book called Big Dirty Money, I get very frustrated with how the white, wealthy, and well-connected treat our laws as optional and gain wealth and power through the commission of fraud and the mass victimization of the public. And he is the poster child for that. I'll agree. To see even a modest amount of comeuppance is a reason for joyful celebration. There's that word again, comeuppance. Matthew then says, the conventional wisdom is that this is a weak case, similar to the one against former U.S. Senator John Edwards. That's true. I did see a lot of people talking about the Edwards case. But, I would say, as a reminder, Edwards did get indicted, too, and went to trial. Now, he was not convicted in that proceeding. And so I guess people are going to say, well, so then neither will Donald Trump be. But one, Donald Trump was probably more flagrant. Two, probably more women involved. Three, too many other people who knew about it. And four, is extremely dumb and a real jerk ass and deserves to be convicted. Probably, he probably even deserves to be wrongly convicted, even if he didn't do exactly what's being described here in these charges. And that's a real thing, even though you're not supposed to do it. And John Edwards doesn't come in with the same kind of baggage. Anyway, so, yes, there was this comparison to Edwards, who was not convicted. Tell me why, Matthew asks, you think differently. Well, I guess I would say two things, says Jennifer Taub. I don't know that election fraud charges will be a part of this. I believe that the falsification of business records charges may be similar to the records charges that we saw in the successful conviction of the Trump Corporation and the Trump Payroll Corporation just this December. And so instead of the analogy being to John Edwards, the more apt analogy is to the successful indictment by Bragg just a few months ago. What kind of financial records falsification would have been involved with Stormy Daniels, asks Matthew, as though he doesn't know. Jennifer says, so the Trump Corporation says, here is a legal expense for Michael Cohen. And if they had just said it's a reimbursement for a cash outlay, that wouldn't have been a false record. But they put it down as a legal expense. It's not a legal expense or a real business expense because this was a personal expense of Donald Trump. If they had just said reimbursement for a cash outlay, at least that would have been true. That's interesting. That's true. So, Matthew says Trump reimbursed Cohen $130,000 for the Stormy Daniels hush money. She answers, well, there are two different numbers. There's also, where's my dramatic music? Why am I playing it? There's also the Karen McDougal case, which might be part of this. Matthew says, I guess what I was getting to is this. Trump's got enough money to pay Daniels. Why deduct it as an expense? And Jennifer says, and just what do you mean he has enough money? Well, enough to want to avoid a false records charge. To extend Caitlin Flanagan's analogy, which is linked herein, it's like going to get your taillight fixed when you have a dead body in the trunk. Does he mean trunk? But okay. Jennifer, I don't really know if I understand that analogy, but okay. Remember the whole Spy magazine thing, Jennifer says. What Graydon Carter did. And it's, if you don't, it says here in brackets, in Spy magazine, the deceased 1980s magazine, that is. And I used to read that from time to time. It was kind of interesting. The editors sent small checks of less than $1 in even smaller amounts to rich people to see if they would cash them. Trump led the pack, cashing even 16-cent checks. That's how he's built. It doesn't surprise me that he wouldn't try to squeeze every tax deduction. On stage with Hillary Clinton, he said that makes him smart. And that came up earlier today, too. Matthew then says, if you had a body in the trunk, you'd be careful. And she says, you don't get the taillight fixed, but you are also not Donald Trump. True. So, what might the charges be? Okay. Well, Jennifer says, I think it's business records falsification. I think it's tax evasion. And I think it's conspiracy. And I think it's a scheme to defraud. The successful jury trial is a blueprint. So the same charges that we saw successfully brought against the Trump organization. This is going to look a lot like that. I'm not prepared either to say that it could go beyond and into Karen McDougal's case. And if it does, maybe it does so just to establish that there's a pattern here, but they probably don't do. I mean, I got no real indication that they really explored the Karen McDougal, Elliott Broidy, Gowenwe, what was it, Joe Lowe case? Joe Lowe, that was his name. But it should be explored. I mean, maybe not in the courtroom here, unless they've already explored it elsewhere, but by journalists at this point, at any rate. All right, well, anyhow, let's see. Matt goes on to say, it sounds like the evidence is in the documents, or do you think it also depends on witness testimony and Michael Cohen's credibility? And she says, it's everything. By the way, so that you know, I'm not chewing on some of the jelly bellies added to the cocktail, I guess. Okay, I see. Yeah, my husband is calling them jelly beans instead of jelly beans. Ha. Okay. Does Michael Cohen's credibility matter? I think Cohen's a great witness. When you meet him, you realize he's a very sincere person, and he's putting his cards, at least with respect to this, on the table. But it doesn't matter because they will have people like Trump's 2016 campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, as a potential witness, maybe. Maybe former Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg, too. That'll be interesting. I mean, in a way, that might not matter either, right? Like, I think Cohen's a great witness. She says, well, you know, people will be attacking his credibility because he's been to jail, right? He was convicted of a crime. And you're like, well, don't worry, because there's other witnesses, like incredible, insane, galactic scale liar Kellyanne Conway. Well, that's not really going to add too much to it, but I guess in their world, it makes a difference. And also, other guy who will be, maybe if he comes to testify, just fresh from jail himself, Alan Weisselberg. So I don't really know that they, well, don't worry about having to believe a guy who's been to prison for lying, because we're going to bring the biggest liar in the world who hasn't been to prison, and then another professional Trump liar who lied for most of his adult life, who's fresh from prison himself. That's not the best backup, if you ask me. Anyway, let's see. Now Matthew asks, well, we think Weisselberg might have flipped, right? He wouldn't go after Trump, the individual, just the Trump organization in his previous testimony. Jen says, is it Jen or Jessica? Jennifer Taub, I've lost track here, has this to say. Well, I lost my spot here. This is another wild card. What about Weisselberg? For the first time, the tables are turned. Remember when Trump was in office? If there was a scandal every day, there was another one the next day just to push the first one out of view. The tables are turned. Bragg just pulled a fast one. Boom! We're going to get Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis. And then we're going to get maybe some Department of Justice Special Counsel Jack Smith stuff. So, do other prosecutors wait, asks Matthew. Wait for what? This is not the DMV. That's an interesting point. Right. Sort of who puts him on trial first. That's what he means by wait. Well, why wait? That's true. It doesn't really matter to Fani Willis if she's got a case ready to go, but he's on trial in New York right now. So what? Bring the charges if you're ready, if you want to. The trial can wait, but bring the charges. Anyway, so Matthew says, well, who puts him on trial first matters. And that's another thing, too, right? It could take a year, for all we know, to get from indictment, arraignment to trial on this case. I imagine it will be an enormously complex case, and Donald Trump will make it that much more complex. And, of course, he'll probably employ his favorite tactic of trying to drag everything out so that, it gets closer to the election, and then he can claim that the prosecution, if it goes forward, is that much more political in nature, might even be able to try and make a play for, we should suspend the whole thing until after the results of the election are known, and then if I win, you should suspend the trial for later. Any number of things that he could be playing for at this point. Anyway, so the question of who puts him on trial first is not necessarily determined by who indicts first. I should point that out. It's absolutely possible that the second indictment elsewhere or third indictment goes to trial before the other two. It's a matter of, are you ready? Is your evidence ready? Is Trump able to convince the trial judge to stretch things out or not? And they might convince the first trial, the trial judge in the first indictment might be fooled into stretching things out for a year, but the trial judge for the third indictment, either because he or she already knows what Trump is up to or has dealt with him all the way throughout this process anyway, or just reads the newspaper and sees that the other trial judges are being, in that judge's view, fooled into stretching out the process, and they don't want that to happen to their case. They just say, well, we're going to do the opposite. There's no real reason why it's not like first indicted, first to trial. It doesn't happen that way, especially if they're happening across different jurisdictions. State courts, federal courts, Georgia, New York, Washington, D.C., anything. The order could be anything. So I imagine Jennifer Taub will be talking about that. She says, well, we know the story of Merrick Garland. Even though I had a sweet spot for him when he did the raid on Mar-a-Lago, I soured on him again when he was not acting quickly. And let me just say, Garland should be hanging his head in shame, because if he had appointed a special counsel in his first year, we would have had indictments on the biggest crime against the American people, orchestrating the attempted coup. Well, as it turns out, apparently the American people don't agree that that's the most important one, amazingly enough. Anyway, so good for Bragg, but shame on the Department of Justice. Next question here. You've studied how white-collar criminal defense lawyers get their clients out of financial jams. What's the best defense for Trump? Her answer, this is different, though, because when it's a giant corporation and there's a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violation, like bribing a foreign official, that's something that the lawyers can say, well, it's this division in Mexico, and this is what went down, and we're doing an independent study, and we're firing all the bad apples, and we're going to put in compliance, and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the situation. This is Trump's eponymous corporation. The guy called all the shots. That's one thing, true. Trump can hire as many attorneys as he wants, but the blows keep coming from everywhere like he's in the ring, and he's up against many better boxers. The drug dealer you see on TV or in real life has more protection between him and the actual crime than Trump, says Matthew here. Jennifer answers, he learned from Roy Cohn. Don't take notes. The guy doesn't put things in writing. Remember, there's also a civil trial coming up in 3 weeks. The civil trial for, he's forgotten, I guess. And just to be sure that we all know we're on the same page, we're talking about E. Jean Carroll, says Jennifer Taub. Oh, I know. That seems ridiculous to talk about before the indictment, but let's talk endgame. Is there any kind of deal that forestalls verdicts? Is there something Trump could agree to that Bragg could live with? And she answers, it's not clear to me which trial will happen first. If you think about the 2000 election, there were state cases and then there were federal cases. All that fades from view, and all we remember is that the Supreme Court ultimately said, stop counting. We will have lots of cases. I'm down to just the jelly beans. She's speaking of her lemon drop cocktail. And now they're finally kind of melting into the glass. It's okay. This is my last day of teaching when Donald's been indicted, right? And let's see, Matthew says, if this is not the time to uncork the jelly bellies, when is it? Okay. Just a little bit of fun banter back and forth about that. All right. So what we draw from that is a good reminder. It doesn't necessarily mean that first to indict is first to trial, and you should keep that in mind. I don't know if that's going to change your mind about things or not, But I guess it would be interesting to watch what the super savvy pundits who complained that the whole thing was bad for Democrats because they indicted him and yada yada or whatever, or say this is the weakest case. Not only does the public disagree, but it's not necessarily the case that that's the first one that goes to trial. And that's actually important, and everybody should be aware of it. Okay, let's see. Other things to uncork here. Gosh, there's many. But let's see. Is this does this help us get some context? We're really going to have to, just stay on the subject for the day. I think it was pretty big that we missed it on Friday. Here, I wondered whether we might do well to read again from the New York Times more stuff about the indictment from Michael Schmidt and Maggie Haberman. This could really derail everything, or it could be insightful. We'll have to see. It could be either one. Under the headline of Trump says the justice system has been, and there's their big word of the year for them, weaponized. He would know, which is essentially like as close as the New York Times comes to a headline that reads, as we would have written it, that every Republican accusation is a confession. Changed my mind. The former president is attempting to cast the investigations into his actions as politically motivated uses of the justice system. In office, he regularly sought to use government powers against his foes. We know this, and we also know most of the incidents already, but it might be nice to have a recitation of them all in one place. And here's their offering on this. As he awaits possible indictment by the Manhattan District Attorney, now we know that he hasn't been indicted. This is a March 29th article, the day before the indictments came down. And remains under scrutiny in multiple other criminal investigations. Former President Donald Trump has regularly railed against the justice system that he contends has been deployed against him by his political opponents. Which it has, and that's true. But it doesn't mean what he thinks it means. His political opponents oppose him because he is a dirty, filthy criminal, among many other things. And the Justice Department and the justice system exists to hold to account dirty, filthy criminals. And that's what we have here. It's too facile a look at things where these savvy opinion journalists ended up, oh my gosh, it's so bad for democracy to indict a former president. The implication being that you're indicting him just because you disagreed with him politically. But no, that's not why the indictments are coming down. And no, not all of our disagreements that were initially political remained entirely political, because he did, in fact, weaponize the federal justice system and federal everything system in order to punish his political enemies. And that's wrong. And it's coming back to haunt him, as it should. He should be held to account for these things. And the fact that he did it for political reasons doesn't mean that charging him with that crime is a political charge. It means it's a regular criminal charge, because the thing that he did, though politically motivated, was criminal. There you have it. Okay. So let's get on with the article here. Here's the claim, ready, that he's making at his Texas rally, I guess, when he was just recently in Waco. The Biden regime's weaponization of our system of justice is straight out of the Stalinist Russia horror show, he told a rally in Texas on Saturday night. But, as is often the case with Mr. Trump, his accusations, widely repeated by other Republicans, reflect his own pattern of conduct. That is basically just a New York Times restatement of every Republican accusation is a confession. His history of threatening or seeking to employ the expansive powers of the presidency to go after his enemies, real and perceived. He was always telling me that we needed to use the FBI and IRS to go after people. It was constant and obsessive, and it's just what he's claiming is being done to him now, said John F. Kelly, Mr. Trump's second White House chief of staff. By the way, I know this is an unnecessary departure, but I'm going to do it anyway. He was always telling me that we need to use the FBI and the IRS to go after people. Not only is that just flat wrong, but we know that this is wrong, and we know that this is terrible, and we know that this is actually the history of the Richard Nixon administration, when I guess it was still an open question as to whether or not it was right or wrong. it was defined supposedly for all time as a wrong, and the deal was that we were all supposed to recognize that it was a wrong and was going to stay a wrong forever in exchange for, okay, fine. We all agree that it's wrong. It won't happen again. Let's just not prosecute Richard Nixon because it would be terrible for the country and yada, yada, and set a bad precedent. And then Republicans will try to indict former Democratic president in a tit for tat and da, da, da. And we don't want this. And so the best thing to do is let the long national nightmare be over. Don't prosecute Richard Nixon. We all now understand that you can't use the FBI or the IRS to go after your political enemies. Everyone knows it. Common understanding. Therefore, won't happen again. And it's not really been that long since that happened, but it's a while now. And I guess coming up on 50 years since, since I guess we all reached that common conclusion, 1974 or so. And 50 years later, it's no longer a common conclusion at all. We actually are looking in the rearview mirror at a president having done exactly the same thing. And so I guess if you're still standing there saying, yeah, we can't establish this precedent, it'll be bad for democracy, I could tell you this, what would be pretty bad for democracy is having such an obvious case that you really should have been indicting a president, but you make this stupid argument that you're making now, 50 years ago, and say, well, it's bad, we should move on, no one will ever do it. And 50 years is actually kind of a long time, but it's also well within living memory for a lot of people. And, maybe somebody should say, actually, we tried that and it wasn't really very long before we were right back where we started from. So maybe that experiment has already been tried and failed and we should try a different one instead. Anyway, back to Haberman and Schmidt here. I would tell him why it was wrong, John Kelly would say, and while I was there, I did everything I could to steer him away from it and tell him why it was a bad idea, Mr. Kelly said. I thought we were successful, but he would often ask a lot of people to do a lot of things that he didn't want to do himself in the hopes that someone would do it and he could claim he did nothing wrong, which, by the way, is a great part of the story. And a clear indication that Trump himself knew that it was wrong. He just hoped that if he kept saying someone should do it, someone would be willing to do it for him and take the fall for him as well, so that it wouldn't be him. He knew that he could go down for it, and he didn't want to be the one to be blamed for it. But he does deserve that blame. Some of his demands were public and to some degree a political performance, like his calls never acted upon for the prosecution of Hillary Clinton, his defeated rival in the 2016 campaign. And by the way, again, that's another stupid departure I have to make. Oh, it would set such a bad precedent, and you can't be, bringing prosecutions against our political foes once we win. But of course, his whole campaign was, when I win, I'm going to bring political charges against my political opponent. And then they weren't able to cobble those charges together. And then he, who was actually a giant criminal, it was fairly easy to cobble those charges together once he wasn't president. And now it's a bad thing to do all of a sudden because it's happening to him. Other actions were personal and more petty. He blocked then Speaker Nancy Pelosi from using a military plane in 2019 to visit troops in Afghanistan. Andrew McCabe was temporarily denied his federal pension upon retiring as deputy director of the FBI after intense criticism from Mr. Trump for his role in the Russia investigation. In some instances, Mr. Trump acted more quietly and persistently. Among those he wanted to see prosecuted was John Kerry, the former senator and Democratic presidential nominee and Secretary of State under Barack Obama. Trump maintained that Kerry had broken the law by staying in touch with Iranian officials with whom he had negotiated a nuclear deal that Mr. Trump was unwinding. As president, Trump repeatedly pressed senior officials behind closed doors about using the Justice Department to target Kerry, according to two people familiar with the matter. Ultimately, federal prosecutors in New York were pushed by senior Justice Department officials in Washington to investigate Kerry, according to the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan at the time. John Bolton, who served as Mr. Trump's national security advisor, said the former president is now clearly playing to a base that has increasingly embraced his claims of weaponization about a range of investigations and responded to his portrayal of himself as a victim. But Bolton said, The idea that he's a paragon of virtue who didn't do this to other people and is now a victim of this unfairness really is laughable. Asked to comment about Mr. Trump's use of the levers of power to go after his enemies, including Mr. Kerry, a senior consultant to Mr. Trump's campaign, Chris LaCivita spoke only of Mr. Kerry and reiterated the call for his prosecution, calling him a threat to national security. For decades, Trump, that was really a useless paragraph, Trump has generally viewed institutions and systems as entities that reward friends and allies of those leading them and punish their enemies. It was how he perceived the world of machine politics that surrounded him in New York City as he was growing up. Don't blame it on that. He has long made clear that he believes every system and every person is corruptible. Congratulations to him for corrupting this one. Anyone will say anything if you pay them enough. I know that and you know that. The former CIA director, John Brennan, recalled Mr. Trump saying, I should have done it in his voice, at their first meeting in reference to his distrust of human intelligence sources. And I'm way behind in playing our outro music. Let's get going on that. Mr. Trump has insisted that he would not be facing the possibility of an indictment in Manhattan on charges related to hush money payments to a porn star if times were different. He has described Robert Morgenthau, who died in 2019 and was a predecessor of the current Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, as a friend of mine who would not have tolerated a prosecution. While Mr. Trump did little to hide his desire to use his power against his foes, he often blasted it out on his Twitter account and discussed it publicly. It's unclear how much impact his demands had in the face of the reluctance to act upon him on the part of aides, prosecutors, and others. Trump privately pushed aides like Mr. Kelly to revoke the security clearances of former top intelligence officials who were critical of him. Yes, someone wrote an op-ed criticizing you, but that doesn't mean you should go and do that, Kelly recounted telling Trump. Trump's desire to order the Justice Department to prosecute Mrs. Clinton and James Comey, whom he had fired as FBI director, was rebuffed by his White House counsel at the time, Donald F. McGahn II. Well, plenty more examples in here. But it's good to see them coming around even in different words to the main idea here, which is, of course, that every Republican, and at least every Trump accusation is, in fact, a confession. So the best you can hope for, I think, from Schmidt and Haberman. Not a bad way to end today's show.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
So, bad or not, it is the way we're ending today's show. And, in fact, it'll probably be the way that Justice Putnam begins his show, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. But he'll also wander into other areas, like voters with disabilities are often overlooked in voting battles. But I guess they're getting some notice now. Let's find out exactly how next.